Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are zeroing in on an enormous economic shift. Really quite profound and maybe often misunderstood. We are talking about Africa, a continent just poised for this massive demographic wave. I mean, by 2030, it's projected to be the world's second largest region population-wise.
Right behind South Asia. It's incredible scale.
Exactly. And you combine that scale with, immense natural resources, a rapidly rising middle class. The potential seems, well, staggering.
It absolutely is. On paper, at least.
But here's the kicker our research uncovered.
Yeah.
The standard, the conventional international business models, those top-down strategies focusing on giant deals, big infrastructure.
Real playbook.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to be fundamentally missing the most relevant opportunities on the continent. True sustainable growth, it seems, isn't just about mining and oil. It's really about grassroots inclusion, things driven by, say, smallholder farmers or women running these highly localized businesses from home.
That's the core of it.
So our mission today is to really deep dive into our sources and pull out the lessons needed to unlock that decentralized potential.
And what's fascinating here, as you mentioned, is the sheer complexity. I mean, we're not dealing with one single market.
No.
You've got 54 countries, vast rural populations, really varying political risk profiles, and these profoundly strong traditional cultures.
Yeah, it's incredibly diverse.
So development and business growth here. Well, they simply cannot follow typical Western models that just prioritize, pure efficiency or mass globalization. It doesn't map cleanly.
Right.
Success seems to require a completely different mindset, one that's focused on deep localization and also recognizing the sustainable organic qualities that are already there in these local economies.
Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe start by acknowledging why that standard approach so often fails.
Good place to start.
Historically, you have development institutions like the IMF, the World Bank.
Yeah.
They've often pushed these resource-based top-down models.
They have, and look, they do offer legitimate benefits sometimes. Guidance on increasing maize production, things like that.
It's your technical advice.
But the solutions are often very capital intensive, right? They're designed for large-scale commercial farming, and they tend to just ignore the local realities.
They miss the context.
Exactly. This is that classic tension, the battle between globalization and localization, but kind of cranked up to 100 here.
Yeah.
In any market, whether you're talking consumer behavior or HR, you have to find that balance, that sweet spot between standardizing things and fitting the local market.
Of course.
But in many parts of rural Africa, traditional customs aren't just like preferences. They can be deeply ingrained, almost non-negotiable cultural aspects.
Right, not just nice to haves.
No. So what seems perfectly rational to an outside agronomist, maybe someone with access to lots of capital and tech, it might be completely irrelevant or maybe even offensive to a local landholder who's limited by centuries of custom, maybe has zero access to modern tech, or simply sees the world differently.
And our sources really emphasize that the level of localization needed is, well, it's extreme.
It has to be micro level.
Yeah. Techniques, agricultural techniques that work brilliantly in one demonstration project or even within one specific tribal community, they might just not be accepted or scalable in the next village over, even if it looks remarkably similar to an outsider.
Because it isn't similar underneath. Those deep-seated customs, tribal differences, they're like invisible walls that these top-down, one-size-fits-all solutions just keep running into.
You really have to earn that community buy-in, village by village, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Failing to respect that micro-level differentiation, it's almost always fatal to external programs, which, shifts our focus entirely.
How so?
Well, if the centralized capital-heavy model isn't the main answer, then we have to look towards indigenous capital and the informal economy.
Okay, indigenous capital and the informal economy. Let's start with the farmers, the smallholders.
The backbone.
We're talking about, what, roughly 500 million smallholders across Africa? Is that right?
Around that number, yes. And collectively, they're producing something like 80% of the continent's food.
80%. They are literally feeding the population.
They are.
Now, here's what I found really key regarding sustainability. Their existing methods, the ways they farm now, they're often already high in those organic, natural, sustainable qualities that, first world consumers are now paying premiums for.
That's a critical insight. The value is already inherent.
Right. So the challenge isn't about forcing sustainability onto them. It's more about connecting that existing, organically developed supply to the wider market.
Without destroying those very qualities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or letting middlemen or corruption siphon off all the value.
Precisely. And alongside the farmers, we find this other massive, often untapped economic engine, the informal economies, frequently run by women.
Right. Talk about that. Because women face, well, huge practical difficulties entering the formal workforce in many places, don't they?
They really do. Think about time-consuming, demanding domestic duties, sometimes a real lack of safe or reliable public transport.
And often a higher vulnerability to violence or harassment when they travel for work.
So formal employment isn't always feasible or even desirable.
For many, no. Therefore, home-based entrepreneurship, maybe selling prepared food, beverages, running tiny shops from their homes, it becomes often the only viable way for women to boost the family income.
And it lets them monetize skills they already have, traditional skills maybe.
Exactly, while still conforming to social expectations about maintaining the household. And interestingly, our sources noted this structure can also allow men to, quote, have their space. Meaning it avoids direct competition in the formal sector, which can sometimes cause social friction. It's a kind of economic strategy built around maintaining social harmony.
Fascinating. It's resourcefulness born from constraints.
Incredible resourcefulness. And to illustrate that, consider this really specific example using what we call obsolete technology. In places like Uganda, Tanzania, they've been taking recycled, treadle-operated sewing machines, the old non-electric ones, like my grandmother had. Yeah, considered useless in the UK or elsewhere now.
Totally useless elsewhere. They ship them over.
And then what? Just hand them out?
No, it's smarter than that. There are vocational programs set up to train disadvantaged youth, sometimes disabled youth, in the skills needed to repair and restore these machines.
So building local capacity first.
Precisely. Then, once restored, these simple electricity-free machines provide a sustainable, reliable income source for women in villages. They can make and sell clothes.
That's brilliant. Low-tech, high-impact.
It's a perfect case study, really. Inherent sustainability meeting practical need. And that specific project engaged over 3,000 households over 10 years, just through community capacity building.
Wow.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, these kinds of successes really demonstrate the critical need for what our sources are calling the participatory ecosystem approach.
Participatory ecosystem approach.
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means basically flipping the old thinking on its head. It mandates placing the recipients, the smallholders, the women entrepreneurs right at the absolute center of decision-making.
That sounds great in theory, but I have to ask.
Yeah.
If you're talking 500 million smallholders, how do you actually scale participation? Doesn't that risk just grinding everything to a halt?
That's a fair question.
Or does it just mean designing solutions with a representative group, rather than designing for them in isolation?
It's much more the latter. It means designing with them and critically leveraging the structures that already exist on the ground.
Okay.
The emphasis is all on capacity building, shared ownership, using those existing local social networks. That's where the power of that indigenous capital really lies.
Got it.
And the goal is moving beyond just, say, exporting raw crops to turning those materials into higher value-added products locally, while really rigidly maintaining that local sustainability.
Okay, so let's look at some examples of this actually working. You mentioned one in Uganda.
Yes, the Agro-Empowerment Uganda project in Lira. A 10-year project, quite long-term. They successfully helped maize farmers increase their yield, importantly using natural organic methods. But the critical success factor wasn't some huge external cash injection.
What was it then?
It was the fact that the smallholders themselves were active participants in the design and the implementation of the program right from day one.
Real ownership.
Real ownership. And somehow they even managed to integrate 4 different government agencies and a local quality control board, which, as you can imagine, is a massive feat of local coordination.
That sounds almost impossible.
But they did it. Then you have a very different approach, maybe the corporate long view, like Nestle in South Africa.
Nestle, how do they fit in?
Well, they implemented this extremely long-term, tribal-based program to improve cattle herd quality.
Herd quality, why?
Because in some of these communities, wealth is traditionally measured by the number of cows you have, not necessarily the quality of the milk they produce.
Okay. Quantity over quality.
Exactly. So Nestle started bringing in frozen bull semen, high-quality stuff from Europe, and teaching artificial insemination techniques.
Oh, okay. And the timeline?
Decades. Managers there readily admit it will take decades for this program to fully mature.
Decades? I mean, that just flies in the face of every quarterly report, every short-term profit model we see in business today. Why would they commit to something that long?
Because it's deeply strategic, it's a long game, the goal is crystal clear. Ensure that when the rising African middle class starts demanding high-quality chocolate in larger quantities, the necessary locally sourced quality milk will actually be available right there in Africa. It's essentially development as a 50-year business plan.
That's incredible foresight. Investing now for demand that's decades away.
Very different thinking. And then to show how this kind of adaptation works in an urban setting, look at Cashbuild, the South African company.
Cashbuild, what do they do?
They sell building supplies. They saw the challenge faced by new urban migrants, people moving to cities, often lacking collateral, unable to get traditional loans for housing.
A common problem.
Huge problem. So Cashbuild pioneered what they call the incremental home building model.
Incremental build?
Yeah. Instead of needing a massive loan for a whole house up front, they let people buy materials bit by bit as they can afford it. First, maybe just the concrete for a foundation slab.
Okay.
Then later, the materials for a basic shelter frame, then walls, then a roof. Purchases spread out over time as income allows.
That's a really smart institutional innovation, tailored completely to the customer's reality.
Exactly. It fits how people actually earn and spend money in that context. And what all these successes have in common, beyond participation, is protecting the project's integrity right there on the ground.
Which brings us back to that crucial finding you mentioned earlier about influence and who you actually talk to.
Yes, this part is really quite astonishing.
Our sources reveal that outside advisors, development workers, they often fail simply because they naturally gravitate towards the wrong people.
Who are the wrong people?
The researchers called cosmopolitans. You know, the Western educated contacts, the ones who speak the advisor's language fluently, understand the paperwork, look familiar.
The easy contacts, the ones who seem like us.
Precisely. But these are often the exact individuals who might be disconnected from, or sometimes even viewed with suspicion by, the actual intended recipients of the aid or the program.
So the advice is,
practitioners, policymakers, they have to intentionally bypass those easy contacts. Actively seek out the real grassroots influencers.
like who?
Village elders, respected women leaders within the community, maybe the quiet holders of traditional knowledge or wisdom.
People who might not put themselves forward.
Exactly. It's a fundamental lesson. Individuals who look like leaders or present themselves loudly as community spokesmen may not actually have any real followers or influence where it counts.
There's a stark example of this, isn't there, from Soweto?
Yes. The education projects years ago. There was this one U.S.-funded school, PACE. Technologically superb, great facilities. But it ultimately failed. Why? Because it apparently missed recognizing distinct neighborhood boundaries within Soweto, and crucially, it used mostly outside staff.
So no local buy-in or protection?
None. It became vulnerable to looting, vandalism, and eventually was destroyed because it had no real community roots or protection.
And the contrast?
The contrast was a local South African project, the Funda Center. They learned the hard way. They located it strategically on the edge of the settlement for better security.
Okay.
And critically, they employed respected local elders. These elders weren't teaching calculus or anything.
Right.
They were simply there. They served as informal monitors, ombudspersons. They watched over the assets, mediated disputes, provided that essential real-time insight that no outsider could ever get. They were the eyes and ears and the respected presence.
That presence acted as a shield, essentially, which highlights the need for a specific role in these kinds of projects, doesn't it? The minder.
The minder function. Yeah, tell us about that. Because when you're operating in environments where maybe government structures are weak, or corruption is unfortunately pervasive.
You need someone whose explicit job is to maintain the integrity of the mission on the ground.
What does that look like practically?
Well, the minder's job is very practical. They need to know the community deeply, intimately, have close, trusted ties to the respected leaders, the real ones.
Okay.
And they need to keep a vigilant eye on materials, on finances, make sure things go where they're supposed to go.
So they're like a human security system.
In a way, yes. They compensate directly for the lack of strong, reliable, formal institutional checks and balances. Their presence helps ensure equipment doesn't just walk away, that funds actually reach the intended people instead of getting lost to corrupt middlemen, and that the project's long-term goals and societal impact stay prioritized over somebody's short-term gain.
Okay. So wrapping this up,
Yeah.
what does this all mean for the future of international business development in Africa? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it strongly suggests the only viable path forward is through some kind of hybrid institutional framework.
Hybrid, meaning?
It's not just about large-scale capital efficiency, the old model. It's got to be about leveraging local strengths, integrating that organic sustainability, the kind that, as we said, already exists in many villages, and building deep community trust through genuine participation, through highly localized expertise, like we saw with Cash Build or the Treadle sewing machine centers.
So it's a synthesis. Local knowledge meets international investment, maybe, but on local terms.
That synthesis seems key, yes. And really digging into that local reality, it raises a final important question, maybe for you, the listener, to consider.
Okay.
We know, often anecdotally or through case studies, about the vulnerability of underserved communities, how they can be exploited by middlemen, by corrupt officials. It's documented, but maybe piecemeal.
Right, we hear the stories.
So the question is, how can scholarly work, and maybe more importantly, real-world practitioners, move beyond just documenting this problem? How can we develop a fuller, more systematic understanding of corruption's specific impact on these particular populations? And based on that deeper understanding, what specific new institutional designs are needed? Perhaps leveraging NGOs, leveraging those informal community structures we talked about. What needs to be created to truly remedy it, to build resilience against that exploitation?
That's a big question, finding ways to build those resilient hybrid institutions.
Exactly. That pursuit, figuring out those hybrid models that actually work on the ground and protect the vulnerable, that feels like where the really crucial societal innovation needs to happen.